Well, welcome back, everybody, from Vintage Iron Range Dirt Track Racing. Today I am joined by legendary racer Loren Sauter. Loren, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time and stopping by. Loren, were you from Hibbing then? When you raced, is that where you
Born
lived?
and raised in Hibbing, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why did you start racing?
I kind of got involved in racing as a pitman, and my parents lived on First Avenue, and right next door, Vern Westchildren lived out in that area, and so I basically got started in racing being a pitman for Vern.
Okay, I remember Vern back in the old yellow Fords he always raced.
Yeah.
What about you? About what year was that, would you figure?
About 63 or 64.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I jokingly say that as a pitman, I never knew that you could actually ride in the tow vehicle, because whether I was enough help or wasn't worthy of the price of admission, but they always stuck me in the trunk of the stock car and bolted it shut, and didn't let me out until they got on the backstretch over there.
So you weren't afraid to sneak in once in a while back?
No, I was forced to.
How did you were always number 88 when you raced?
Right.
Okay, how did you pick that number?
I had an uncle that used to race years ago, and he was number 88.
And I believe your dad used to race too.
Yeah, my dad raced a very short period of time, but he was 0-0, and for some reason, I just picked the number 88.
Okay. What all classes did you race throughout your career?
I started off like everybody did in Hibbing, that in the six-cylinder hobby stock class, and then after winning the championship in '69, then I advanced into the super stock class in 1970, and was fortunate enough to win the track championship in Grand Rapids and in Hibbing that year. And that fall, I was drafted into the Army after spending a couple of years as a draftee. Came home and then raced late models for a few years.
So the three different classes you...
Right.
And back at one time in Hibbing, those were the three classes.
Right.
What all brands of cars did you race?
My racing career started off in the ever-popular Hudson. There was a fellow that lived out on DuPont Road. George Chandler had a junkyard out there. And I don't know how he acquired all these cars, or if they belonged to somebody else, but he had several rows of Hudsons. And each of these cars was full of parts, and pistons and brake shoes and clutches. And the cars were for sale. And I approached George about it, and he said, any one of those cars in that row you can have for $100. So I brought out a fresh six-cylinder battery, and the first one that started was a 262 cubic inch Hudson. So that's the one I drove out of there and made a stock car out of it. But those that raced the Hudsons, the primary motor that everybody wanted in the Hudson was a 308 cubic inch motor that came from the factory with two barrels, but I think they used to limit it to just one 2-barrel. But for those that raced those, I mean, they were a pretty fast car for as big as they were. Corey Slusher from Hibbing was the Hudson specialist for many, many years.
Yep. So then what other types of cars did you end up going on to racing?
In the six-cylinder class, I started off in a Hudson, then I had a 58 Ford, then a 57 Ford. And then when I raced in the super stock class, I raced a Chevrolet, a 57 Chevrolet.
How about your stint in late models?
Started in a Dodge Charger, 69 Dodge Charger, then raced a 72 Duster. And then after that, the last car that I raced was a 75 Camaro.
Okay. There was quite a array of cars to pick from back in those days.
Right.
When you raced, was there anybody that you looked up to as being a very good racer, or somebody that you tried to, you set your goals to try to be like?
My favorite racers back in the day when I was a kid sitting in the grandstands were Donnie Oz, and then from out of Duluth, Billy Nelson, that drove modifieds.
Okay. How many years total do you figure you raced?
I think about 8 years.
Okay. With a couple-year break there for the Army?
Yep.
What all tracks did you race at?
Raced at Grand Rapids and Hibbing and Superior and Proctor.
Did you ever travel out of that area at all for any bigger races? Or
Went in the fall of the year. They used to have races up in Thunder Bay at Riverview Raceway, and raced up there a couple times.
But so for the most part, on a weekly basis, you kept it around this area?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
How many nights a week did you usually race when you were going at it?
In
Full
the
throttle?
six-cylinder class, I only raced one night a week because I was pretty tough on equipment. I had to spend the other 6 days fixing what I wrecked on on Saturday night. But in Super Stocks, we raced Friday and Saturday night.
Okay. Is there anybody that helped you throughout your career with your racing program?
There are several people that helped me, but my dad years ago used to race, so he helped me. And Shaddy Holman was instrumental. He built the motor for the Super Stock that we had, and I know that he's a Hall of Fame member. But the person that I'd like to recognize that did the most for me, and I would have been nothing more than an also-ran if it hadn't been for the help of this individual, is Fred Beal. I mean, he basically, after the passing of his uncle Joe Kittner, decided to help me for a while, and basically the six-cylinder Ford that I had, if it wasn't for Fred, I would never have had it ready for the races ever. And the same thing with the Super Stock. He was instrumental in building the car and maintaining the car.
Yeah, Fred's a very skilled craftsman, and he's helped a lot of people throughout the years with building cars and whatnot. But probably somebody that the racing community really isn't very familiar with, but he's one of those behind-the-scenes guys who really gave a lot to help the people he helped. Also happens to be my uncle.
Yeah.
So throughout your racing career, are there any accomplishments then that you're proud of achieving?
Well, 3 track championships, but probably a highlight of my racing career was one night in Grand Rapids in the Super Stock class. We ended up in the consolation race and won the consolation and went to the back of the feature, and in a 15-lap race, on the last corner in the last lap, I beat Mr. Grand Rapids Speedway, Chub Christie, to a drag race to the flag, and beat Chub Christie on the last lap, and that's my all-time favorite race that I remember.
So your favorite memory was being able to beat Chub Christie?
Beating Chub Christie.
So he was pretty dominant in his prime.
Very dominant, yes.
So your track championships, do you remember like what classes or what years or what tracks?
Yeah. The six-cylinder hobby stock championship I won was in 1969, and I beat out the second place car was Lenny Pastelli, a legend in six-cylinder hobby stock and V8 hobby stock racing. I think between Grand Rapids and Hibbing, if I remember correctly, I think somebody once told me that he won either 11 or 12 championships between the 2 tracks.
So he was quite dominant in his day.
Extremely dominant. If you could beat Lenny Pastelli on any night, you really beat the best of the best.
And then you won a couple track championships in super stocks?
Right, in 1970, Grand Rapids and Hibbing.
Oh, okay. Now, one of your cars was the Orange Blossom Special. A lot of people remember you by that. What kind of car was that? Was there anything special about that car, or is it just a name you put on there?
It's a 1957 Chevrolet, and I really, after being out of racing, I basically got into classic cars, and I could cry every time I think about what a beautiful car I cut up to make a stock car. But back in the day, I was a Johnny Cash fan, and I remember the song, the Orange Blossom Special, and I thought, well, why not name the car? When I took the car to be lettered by Ken Sweetnam from in Hibbing, I told him I wanted Orange Blossom Special to be the name of the car. And the primary sponsor for the car, the only sponsor I ever had as a race car driver, was Hibbing Salvage and Supply. And Sherman Jalowski, who owned Hibbing Salvage at the time, said, "What are they paying? Because I know what I'm paying to sponsor this car." But the lettering for Orange Blossom Special was bigger than the sponsor's name on the quarter panel.
Oh, kind of a boo-boo in a way.
Well, in a way, yeah.
NASCAR wouldn't let you get away with that, right?
No,
they want their sponsors plugged. Who were some of your main competitors back in your racing days?
Primary competitors in Hibbing would be Gene Percheski, Steve Caron, Bruce Nemi, Phil Lanoy. In Grand Rapids, the standout was Chub Christie, and the Brokings. It seemed like there were enough Brokings for every class of cars you could ever come up with. And
there were a lot of Brokings.
And they were great racers over there.
They were good shoes, and
right.
Even their kids and grandkids now are following right in the same footsteps.
Right.
An extremely good racing family. So then you just ended up out of the blue kind of stopping, quitting racing, and disappearing from being behind the wheel. What made you retire from racing?
The last year that I raced was in 1976, and about midway through the year, my wife was diagnosed as having advanced breast cancer. And out of love and respect, I basically decided to sell everything and spend whatever time remaining she had, the two of us together. So
I think that's definitely the right decision.
I never regret it.
Yeah, there are priorities, and spending time with loved ones
Yeah.
is definitely more important than racing.
It was a great loss for me. Not only were we husband and wife and great friends, but we taught next door to each other, the same grade and same building right next door to each other in McGregor, Minnesota for a number of years.
Because you were a school teacher as a
Right.
as a profession. What is the craziest thing that you've ever witnessed at a racetrack? I'm sure you've seen quite a few crazy things. Probably tough to remember.
I
Which
think
one?
one of the things that I remember, Shaddy Holman and I were standing on the backstretch. Phil Lanoy was in second place in a race of super stocks, and I said to Shaddy, I said, "Boy, I bet you Phil would be surprised if that guy in front lost the wheel." And I no sooner got wheel out of my mouth and the wheel came off the leader, and Phil went on to win the race. Shaddy said, "You know, I'm a little bit worried about you because witches make predictions like that."
Sure got into fortune telling after
Yeah.
that. Do you still go to the races at all anymore?
I'd like to think of myself as sort of an ambassador of the races now because I'm there and I never leave. So many of the people get up and leave when the pure stocks and the street stocks and the Hornets race. I love that class simply because it reminds me of being a young kid and wanting to get involved in racing and realizing that that's the feeder class. That's, you know, where these next
That's yeah.
track champions are coming from.
Yeah, like late models might be, you know, the icing on the cake or the shingles, but them Hornets and pure stocks, they're the foundation.
And it's awfully exciting to watch a kid get out. Like in Superior a couple of weeks ago, I watched a young kid get out of his car after winning his first feature race. He climbed on the car and he let out a scream that he didn't even in microphone for everybody in the grandstands heard him. It's quite thrilling.
So you still go to the races quite regularly then?
Right, yeah.
Yep.
I've actually attended races, whether it's asphalt or dirt, in like 13 different states in a couple different countries.
So you're not afraid to travel to watch a race either?
Well, no.
So it's still definitely in the blood.
Yes, yep.
So you've been there back in the old days and you've been around for the new stuff. What is your take on modern racing?
Well, one of the things that's been encouraging to me is that back in the day there was so much arguing and fighting about when there would be a restart. And I don't know if it's the receivers or transponders or whatever, but there's no arguing with that, where you were or whether or not you were on the right lap or whether you had been lapped or whatever. And I'm also very encouraged by how well run the programs are here up in northern Minnesota and Wisconsin, based on, in the old days there was a tendency to take a 3-hour program and stretch it out over 5 hours and maximize the concession stands, and a lot of local restaurants and bars would complain because they're sponsoring cars and they wouldn't get out of the track until midnight on Saturday night.
So you've been around the country watching races and you think the programs up here run pretty good compared to other areas of the country?
In the last few years, the racing associations in both, or not both, but Proctor, Superior, and Hibbing have done a great job. So
you like modern racing? It's entertaining?
And very entertaining, yeah.
Off the track, like you mentioned earlier, you were a teacher, so that's what you did. Is that what you did your entire career then, off the track?
I was a teacher for about 8 years, and then I was a principal for about 20 years, and then spent my last years as a superintendent of schools.
In the Hibbing area here, or?
I actually finished my career in Mountain Iron Buell School District.
Okay. And that sounds like it would be a good career for a race car driver.
Well, it was, as a young teacher, it was ideal. I had 90 days off in the summer, but you know, the old saying goes, I mean, you can have 4 on the floor and nothing on the table. You got to pay for that car. So I basically was teaching throughout the normal school year, was teaching GED classes at night, and then working for my sponsor, Hibbing Salvage and Supply, in the summers, working on their equipment.
Well, Loren, before we go here, is there anything that you have to say to anybody that might be watching this video?
I was kind of anticipating that question. There's only one person that I think that I owe an apology to, and I've apologized before. One night in a feature race, I was following Bruce Nemi from Virginia, and he went got a little sideways, and I helped him finish it off by spinning him around. And I've always regretted it because I think as a race car driver, that's the only time that I ever did something that I'm not proud of. So Bruce, if you're watching this, I still feel the same way. I even offered him the money from that night, but he just considered it to be an insult on top of injury.
I suppose the emotions might have been running a little high at the time. But
Yep.
So that's what you want to do. You want to apologize to Bruce Sneemy. That's your words of wisdom for everybody?
I was thinking the other day about funny things that I've seen in race cars. Like, I'll never forget the first time I ever saw something on a race car dash saying, "Drive it like it's stolen." And my other favorites are that down at East Bay Speedway in Florida, they have a sign that says, "All unattended children will be sold to the circus." And I saw a bumper sticker at a races one night out of state where it said, "Stock car racing is the only one-ring circus where the clowns have to pay to entertain the audience." I thought that was pretty good.
Well, Loren, I think that's the end. I don't have any more questions for you today. I really appreciate you stopping by and letting me harass you for a bit, but it's nice to see you again, and I'll probably see you at the racetrack soon one of these days.
Well, I'd like to just add one last comment, that for all the little kids you see at the races when they're running around, but the ones that are sitting there very attentive, you never know, that might be in the future. That might be a track champion. That might be a Hall of Fame candidate. So take your kids to the races. Get them involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's definitely good advice. Well, thanks, Loren.
You're welcome.
We'll see you at the track.
Thank you.
Bye.